Now the burden of proof is on you to say that it would hurt the economy because
Okay, I'll demonstrate it to you incredibly simply. Can you name me one country that you want to emulate that doesn't engage in a globalist system like this?
it's not that simple.
Oh, okay.
Quite frankly, you need to subscribe to Ringold.
I don't think Trump's been terrible.
Do you want me to tell you why I think he's been terrible? Do you want to tell me why you like him? What do you want to talk about?
Sure. Kick it off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's been super unsuccessful in general. I feel like his tariffs have been super bad. The rhetoric that he gives, constantly otherizing the left, is super bad. His immigration policy is bad. Been stomping on a lot of our constitutional rights, which I think is super bad. I think he's kind of contributed to losing what it means to be an American. I feel like the American right has a super bad understanding of what like American values are. Violating people's First Amendment rights, pardoning the J6ers was super bad. We've been seeing a lot of like the targeting of the Department of Justice, which is super bad. We can go on. Do you have anything you want to talk about there?
Well, I'll counter with what I think has gone very well with Trump, starting with the fact that he bets on American economic power. And even with some of the miscalculation, even a lot of those tariffs were head scratch. Some of them were head scratchers, but the consumer price index hasn't, and the inflation rate is still at healthy levels. And he's been cracking down on government inefficiency and fraud, especially at the state level in Minnesota. There's a crackdown there, which I think is good. That accountability.
What has Trump done to counter the Minnesota fraud?
I'll let you, speak.
Let's just take it. Let's take it point by point. Let's take it point by point.
Okay, yeah, so I would appreciate it if you give me at least like 10 more secons to just.
Well, I'd like to just take it point by point, right? I would have let you cut me off anywhere if you disagreed with anything that I said, right?
If you want to let me land my plane, I'll keep going.
Well, you already landed your plane on like 2 different issues. I just want to target it on one issue.
Sure.
So, like, what is Donald Trump doing to crack down on any of the Minnesota fraud?
They're starting to file charges, bro. They're actually freezing federal funding. They're actually conducting deep investigations. They're getting the FBI on it too. Small business loans, particularly to a lot of Somalian-run small business loan applications that they were filing. I think a lot of it has to do with these appearingly fraudulent daycares.
So you're saying that he's freezing small business loans for Somalians?
That are suspected of fraudulent activity, yes.
Okay. So when they were suspected of fraudulent activity, don't you think they would have already had the funding paused? Like, what is Donald Trump doing that's unique? I feel like that's exactly what we would expect the government to do. I feel like that's the bare minimum.
We're learning now that a lot of this fraud has been going on for decades. It's been going on. This has been
what fraud are you even talking about?
Particularly where Somalians will start a small business or a nonprofit, such as maybe like a daycare, and then it's actually a scam. It's actually just a laundering scheme so that they can basically line their own pockets and send money back to people in Somalia even.
Sure, where's the evidence
and
for
welfare
that?
Fraud.
Where's the evidence for that?
It started with the Treasury Secretary. The first I heard about it was the Treasury Secretary talking about it in an interview. Now the DOJ is actually conducting full, thorough investigations. They're starting to file charges too, and freeze federal funding. This is actually stuff that's getting pretty serious. So it's not just me making it up.
But I'm asking you for like specifics, right? Like what fraud has been uncovered? Who's being indicted? Is this just something that's at the local level? Like
all around, not just in Minneapolis, but in different parts of Minnesota. It seems like the highest concentrations of this going on is in Minnesota, but now they're starting to actually uncover
what's the scale? Like, how many people do you think have been indicted?
Oh, geez, they're preparing charges for I believe 50. Last I read, 57 people are I believe have already been indicted.
So you think Donald Trump is a good president for indicting 57 people for fraud? I feel like that's something that the DOJ should absolutely be doing anyway. That sounds like a bare minimum thing. Charging 57 people for fraud is not that big of an accomplishment, I don't think.
Well, I do think that this type of accountability, I just don't have the confidence that it would have happened. This type of accountability would have happened under Biden or Harris if she was elected.
Weren't a lot of these investigations already happening under Biden's DOJ?
I'd have to double check that. Most of it is happening recently. Us uncovering this fraud. Most of it, I believe, has been uncovered
Well, I feel like you're
recently.
talking. I feel like you're talking super broadly, right? So you're talking about uncovering
My
fraud in
point is,
Minnesota. Like what? You're not giving me any details, so I can't actually engage with any of the details, right? Like the investigation I think you're referring to started under the Biden DOJ. So you're saying I wouldn't have confidence that Joe Biden would be prosecuting the fraud in the same way, even though he literally did, right? So we can talk about like the specific case that's super popular right now, but if you're just talking about super broad stuff like the Somalians in Minnesota doing fraud, I can't really engage with any of that. You're not even actually making a point. I can bring up like Republicans doing bad things and that the Biden DOJ went after that, but like I'm sure that like it's the bare minimum for the DOJ to go after people who commit crimes. I would expect that to happen. It happened under Biden's DOJ. Like I don't even know what we're referring to here.
Well, basically, what I'm doing is giving credit to Trump's DOJ for the swift response and that they're really taking it serious and cracking down on it. Not just in Minnesota, but I mean, I know Doge didn't really like fulfill all the hopes that we thought it would, and they're already
like
pretty much
nothing.
wrapping it up.
Yeah, Doge was
Well,
was a pretty
again,
resounding failure. Yeah.
they uncovered billions of dollars of wasteful spending, government inefficiency, even more fraud in Social Security that was just basically going unnoticed. If Doge hadn't have stepped in,
Do you
and
genuinely think there was
done those
going
audits,
unnoticed?
yes, I do, because again, Biden's administration did nothing to look into it.
So you
and
understand that we have a bunch of
Trump's
mechanisms
did.
and we have a bunch of mechanisms in the federal government to audit fraud, waste, and abuse. We have the Inspector General and we have the I think the OMB has a branch where they go after fraud, waste, and abuse. Like every three-letter agency has an Inspector General that targets fraud, waste, and abuse. And through the fiscal year of last year, compared to the actual verifiable findings from Doge, the Inspector General found more fraud, waste, and abuse. And then Donald Trump fired a bunch of the Inspector Generals for the three-letter agencies, right? So if he was actually interested in addressing fraud, waste, and abuse, why would he fire the people that are already there with statutory authority to find this over letting the richest person in the world go into the government and basically cut a bunch of government contracts that he has potential special interest from?
Well, my understanding is that the particular amount of wasteful spending that they've already cut that spending, and they've already pretty much fixed the errors and have really cracked down on it. That was stuff that was previously allowed to continue year after year, even further back than that. This is that they actually uncovered a lot of fraud and wasteful spending that had been allowed to go on for years.
I mean, we
But
already saw that when Doge was
any credit.
Well, because he does. I'm not going to give people credit just because they have an R next to their name. I'm not going to give them credit that they don't deserve. Doge was a resounding failure. It looks like they're actually probably going to cost us more money in the long run than they even purported to save. A lot of the findings that they were claiming credit for were unverifiable, because when they actually were giving verifiable things that people could track, they found out that they were just cutting contracts that had already half been paid out and then claiming the entire thing as being saved, even though we already paid out half of it. They were incredibly dishonestly claiming what they saved. Like, why should we even trust this, right? Again, this is the richest person in the world going into our government, cutting things with a sword, even though he has incredibly clear special interests at heart, right? Like, government has contracts with his competitors, and we let him go through and cut contracts willy-nilly. That's terrible.
Whoa, can you prove that it was fraudulent or it was in his best interest, all the stuff that he did?
They couldn't even claim fraudulence for a lot of it. That's what I'm saying. Like, they were claiming that a particular contract was wasteful. They would cut the contract and then claim the savings, even though they had already been paid out. right? That's wasteful. That's fraudulent, right? So like I don't understand why should we should even trust Doge. They're not even giving any sort of corroboration to a lot of their claims. Especially
Yeah,
since we already had people within the three-letter agencies or slightly outside of the three-letter agencies in the office of the inspector general doing audits on these things, suing people who are fraudulently using the money and saving us more money than Doge did, right? Like we already had a way to address this. Like this conception, like, is there always going to be more room to find fraud, waste, and abuse? Sure, but the answer to that isn't letting the richest person come in, appoint a bunch of college dropouts, and then leak a bunch of sensitive information or do a bunch of illegal shit and then get sued and then probably waste more money in the legal system than they even purported to save, right? That's not the answer. The answer is just why don't we just fund our fraud finders more?
well, it's because Americans are pretty disillusioned with bureaucracy, and we all know government is very inefficient
It sounds like a you
and
problem,
waste
right?
a lot of
Doge was
money.
less efficient.
That is not that is a valid concern that a lot of voters like myself had, and so you bringing in a fresh set of
You're just
eyes from somebody who's qualified,
your justification for doing this
very
dog shit
appealing.
way to address fraud, waste, and abuse was just saying that I had a perception that it was a problem. That's not justification enough. Like, why wouldn't we fund the already established
Why
with
not
statutory
audit
authority
the
way to
auditors?
audit the government instead of making a new one that can't do anything, that broke a bunch of laws, that wasted a bunch of money, full of a bunch of people that have no understanding of how our government works?
No, well, a lot of that is just your opinion. I'm saying, why don't we audit
What do
the
you think that I
auditors?
just said was wrong?
That they're all college dropouts, that they have no understanding of how
Do you think a
government
lot of
works,
Elon's
that
team
they're
wasn't full of college
completely
dropouts? Do you remember Big
unqualified.
Balls?
Do I remember what?
Do you remember Big Balls? Like a lot of Elon's team was full of college dropouts with no government experience, right? Elon doesn't have government experience. He's not even he wasn't even born here.
Maybe that's what we need is business people who actually run successful
Who
businesses
have no
with
idea how the government
balanced
worked
budgets.
going through. Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, because people who are career politicians or career bureaucrats oftentimes perpetuate the wasteful spending and inefficiency
That
that
makes no
we've
sense.
had in our
If
government for so long that Americans are disillusioned with.
if
Why not
if I'm
audit the
running
auditors and
if I'm
so we
running
have somebody
a
watching the watchers?
if I'm running a social media company, right? If I'm a content creator, I run a company based off of my content creation, and I hire somebody who audits like wasteful spending. Like, do you think I should expect them to know anything about what I do? Like, why would we invite a bunch of people who don't know the government functions, who have no experience in cutting government functions, in to cut a bunch of shit that they don't know what they're looking at, right? Like
Again,
this is super self-evident too, because Elon
I'm
tried to
glad to
end a
hear
bunch
your
of
opinion,
contracts
but
because
that's
Elon
just
tried to
what.
end a bunch of contracts and then realized they were important and then tried to bring them back, right? Like he tried to reinstate a bunch of contracts that he already cut. So it's incredibly clear that they didn't know what they were cutting, right? If
I'll
that's
look into
true,
it.
if it's true that he would cut contracts and then not realize how important they are, so reinstate those contracts that he already tried to cut, that indicates that he doesn't know what he's doing, right?
I'll have to fact check you on that.
I'm saying if
How
that's
much that
true, that's an indication
happened.
that he doesn't know what he's doing, right?
Well, when it comes to Doge and what they actually accomplished, I would
I'm
like
this
myself
is
to
this is a
do
super
more of
simple
a deep
question.
dive,
If
but
that is true, you agree that that speaks to his incompetence, right?
yes, that would be an incompetent thing. I would have to fact check you on how much that actually happened.
Okay.
I think that that's something that we've actually seen from bureaucrats much more than what we saw from just Doge. It's not exclusive to what Elon did. We've seen that a lot in government and how inefficient and wasteful they can be.
I feel like you're just asserting things, though. Right? Like you're not actually substantiating out of this. I'm not going to contest that fraud absolutely exists in the government. It always does. Having a operation the scale of our government is going to result in fraudulent things happening. But we already have a body that is way better at finding it than Doge. I don't know why we would appoint a bunch of know nothings about the government with no government experience to come in and audit our government. They don't know anything.
I don't think it was as big of a waste of time, and they're as unqualified as you're trying to make them out to be. I think they really did uncover a lot of basic fraud stuff that was
They
actually
didn't.
essentially fraudulent in Social Security. People claiming Social Security checks who are what over 120, 130, 140 years old, ages that we know people
I've
aren't
heard this. I've heard this
currently
claimed a bunch of
living.
times. Like, did they even provide any substantiation for that? I'm pretty sure that's been wildly contested by a lot of people. Hold on, give me 1 second. My fucking laptop is okay. Did Doge find Doge leadership and Elon Musk claimed that millions of people over the age of 100 were receiving fraudulent payments and that 40% of the calls to SSA were fraudsters. The SSA's own data and reports from its Office of the Inspector General, that's what I was just talking about, the thing that is made to audit the three-letter agencies, show that improper payments were less than 1% of the total benefits paid out, most of which are overpayments to living beneficiary due to errors, not fraud. The OIG found that found only 2 cases of potential fraud out of the 110,000 new claims after anti-fraud checks were installed. The claim about payments to those over 100 years old stemmed from a misunderstanding of an old database where absence of birth or death date was often defaulted to an early year like 1875. These individuals were generally not receiving benefits. Okay, so even that seems like it was more of a clerical error than anything else, right? If only there was like somebody who knew how these data collection efforts worked within the three-letter agencies that were there to exclusively audit these three-letter agencies like that.
I just do think that there's value in bringing in a third party that can come in and at least make sure that the auditors are properly auditing and even audit them and make sure that
It's called Congress. You could do that through Congress. You don't need the richest person in the world with special interest in the government to do that
why not? He's a successful
because he has
businessman.
special interest. You don't want him coming in and looking at all of the data collection from the government.
Well, what again? You claim that he conducted fraudulent activity with Doge,
That's not even
but
necessarily what I'm
is
claiming. I'm
that
saying that the potential for fraud was there. So why would we introduce him when we already have a government system that is dedicated to looking at this most people don't even know exist, right? And the justification that I got was that there was a perception of a problem. But I'm saying that even though there's a perception of a problem, we already have the thing that exists to address it, and people don't even know about it, right? Like before talking to me, I want you to be genuinely honest with me. Did you know about the Office of the Inspector General?
no?
Okay. I appreciate you saying that, right? And what I would say is that you can bring up there's a perception of a bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse in the government, and I agree that that's true. But I think there's also a big problem where, um, fuck, there's a name for this kind of analogy thing, but like if you don't know the inner workings of a system, it's really hard to audit that system, right? Like if you're asking me, like if somebody brought their computer to me and said, "Hey, this isn't working. Can you tell me what's broken?" Like no, I don't. I don't know anything about the inner workings of a computer, right? It's a very similar thing. I don't know, like, these people don't know anything about the inner workings of the government. Like, there's been a bunch of clerical errors that are overstated. There's been a bunch of, like, rescind- rescindings of different government contracts and then immediate reinstatements after they realized what they were doing, right? Like, these people just aren't super qualified. And I think the reason that there's a giant perception of like rampant fraud, waste, and abuse is one, the numbers that we fund the government with are pretty astronomical because they don't understand the scope of how big the government is. And two, it's just because they don't know about what the government does, right? Like it's really easy to envision this thing that could be a good thing in the government, but people don't actually go out of their way to check if it even exists before offering a solution, right? Like you're offering a solution to a problem that already has a solution.
Well, you claimed earlier that Doge was basically net negative, that it cost taxpayers more than they
I
essentially
said it could be.
saved, and uh, well, I'll go ahead and teacup right now and look into a
So
little bit
to
more.
be clear, I said it could be, and the reason I said it could be is because they're getting sued for a lot of potentially illegal activity. because Doge doesn't have the statutory authority to do a lot of the stuff that they were claiming to do. And two, because they ended up making recommendations to cut the IRS workforce, I think like 60%, which is going to drastically reduce the government's ability to make money. So if that's the case, if you're reducing the ability for the government to make money and you're costing the government money from, all of these lawsuits, and you're overstating the amount of fraud that you've actually found or overstating the amount of money you've actually saved, it's incredibly possible for it to be a net negative. But I'm not going to make the positive claim that it is or isn't. It's just, I can't see into the future.
Well, do you know how much of the IRS workforce has been cut so far?
I can look it up.
Because I know Joe Biden hired what? Was it as high as 80,000, 60,000 new IRS? It was something, it was a really high number that Biden himself, I believe, new IRS agents that he added.
65% in operation support and 50% in enforcement. Now, granted, this says if Trump's budget proposal passes, but I'm pretty sure it's referring to the Big Beautiful Bill, which passed. So,
so you're claiming that itself is going to lead to the government not being able to effectively collect the revenue?
Well, necessarily, if we already have like a bunch of unpaid dues that the IRS doesn't have the funding to, get already in the economy, and then we cut their enforcement even more, it necessarily follows that we're like the enforcement is going to lead to less duties being collected. Right. And since like the IRS provides us a giant return on investment, that return on investment comes from further enforcement.
By duties, what other than
like
federal
due
income
taxes?
Tax all due taxes. It's an interesting topic. It's, I just again not sure just yet how much of a net negative Doge was.
And to be fair, I'm not certain that we can know that until like after Doge has already fully run its course and we see the ripple effects further into the presidency. I'm just saying that like the actual need for it, I think, was overstated. The actual effect of it, I think, was wildly overstated, if not like maliciously lied about. And the like potential for it to come back in our face, especially since like a lot of whistleblowers have been saying that the people who Elon brought in were like wildly mishandling classified taxpayer data. There's just a lot of concern for it. I think like that alone is enough to at least say it was a failure, right?
Do you mean actual leaks, actual data breaches? Do you mean actual like
opening up for data breaches? I don't know if any had been found.
Information being.
It's been a while since I've looked into the Doge stuff. I can bring up what the whistleblower said real quick.
Well, just to give a little state of the union, I guess, at least how I see it, the GDP is up 5%. The unaliving rate has had a 1-year drop of almost 20%, which is historically a sizable 1-year drop in the unaliving rate. Crime seemingly is coming down across the board. We haven't had catch and release in months, and our border now is considered more safe and secure than it has in a long time.
Sure, we can talk about all this stuff, but before we move on,
detaining non-citizens who do not have legal status at a
we can talk about that, but before we move on, this was what I was referring to. It said technical staff members were alarmed what Doge engineers did when they were granted access, particularly when those staffers noticed a spike in data leaving the agency. It's possible that the data included sensitive information on unions, ongoing legal cases, and corporate secrets. Data that 4 labor law experts tell NPR should never leave the NLRB, and that has nothing to do with making the government more efficient or cutting spending.
Well, you say it has nothing to do with it, but that all sounds like stuff that could be pertinent to us actually trying to do a deep dive into what these agencies are doing. And
well, they're explicitly saying that it's not pertinent, right? That
Again,
there's no
it's
reason that it should be
auditing the
leaving the
auditors. It's
NRLB.
well,
There's also
again,
this one that one of the 19-year-olds that was hired was fired from his internship at an Arizona cybersecurity firm after he was suspected of leaking proprietary information to competitors.
that would be fraud, and I don't think
Right, and
somebody
one of the
committed
people
that
part
kind
of
of for
Elon's
fraud.
team
That
was
again,
doing that.
19 years old does seem very young to do such an important job. I think that yeah, it'd have to be, yeah, hiring a 19-year-old in the first place, it would have to be a very I don't know. I don't even see how a 19-year-old could be qualified at
There
that
was
age.
also a resignation letter from 21 people that the Doge service took over for that alleged that after being integrated into the Doge efforts, there was mishandling of sensitive data and breaking of critical systems. And they resigned due to that reason, that they didn't want to be a part of it.
What critical systems were?
I'm just telling you what they said in the resignation letter. I don't know how much detail they went into. Um,
Yeah, I could see how they could feel
They
threatened by
said, we will
something
not
like
use our
Doge.
skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize Americans' sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize Doge's actions.
I could see how they feel threatened. We all know that if these agencies spend
No. They
less
were a part
money
of
than they
Doge.
did the fiscal. Oh,
They were a part of Doge, and they resigned.
well. I mean, I'm not surprised there were some resignations.
13?
Everything's become very partisan. How many?
13?
Well, everything's become so partisan nowadays that I'm not surprised that some people were.
No. But
Yeah,
what we're seeing, what we're doing right now is partisanship, right? Like these people who are relevant experts to their field saw what Doge was doing to American sensitive information and then wrote a letter resigning, right? Like on the grounds that they're destroying critical like systems to our government and leaking classified information. And we see other whistleblower reports saying the exact same thing. Feels like just to say that they're resigning due to partisanship is partisan in and of itself.
it's particularly the dismantling government systems part that I find questionable. And that's what made me think it was kind of partisan. Is that um, something like what happened to the Department of Education, where I ultimately believe that it should be more up to the states how education is handled. That really a federal agency like the Department of Education is. I don't know if I'm not convinced that it's 100% necessary.
I feel like
Other
we
than
only
some,
I feel like we
other
only
than
say
so,
this because we don't know what the Department of Education really did. Right, because
I
even
mean,
the
I could.
proposal that the Trump administration gives basically just recreates the Department of Education spread out amongst other branches of the government or other three-letter agencies, right? Like they're basically recreating the entire Department of Education. Just part of it's in the OMB, part of it's in um, the EPA or whatever,
Huh.
right? Like even what they're doing, it's not even like really destroying the Department of Education. It's just divvying up the responsibilities to a bunch of other three-letter agencies. Because
That
ultimately,
could
like the
vary.
federal
That
level, like Department of Education had nothing to do with curriculum. It had nothing to do with anything. Basically, just dealt with like funding, like certain funding things, and then like certain disability care, which obviously people don't want cut, so they just gave it to other three-letter agencies. Like it just seems super redundant.
that's what basically media is calling the dismantling of the Department of Education. Is exactly what you said.
Sure, because I mean, there's just no reason to do it, right? It's just purely an optical move, so they can claim victory over something that did nothing, right? Because when Donald Trump says, "Oh, we dismantled the Department of Education," which what most people think is like, "Oh yeah, no more of the federal government telling the state schools what to do," where when the Department of Education was never doing that. It's not something that it ever did, and all of the responsibilities, like major responsibilities of the Department of Education, are being like divvied back up. So there's not even any reason to do
That
it
might
other than
not
just
be a
like pulling
bad
the wool
thing.
over people's eyes.
Well, it might not be a bad thing that that's what's happening.
At the best case scenario, there's no reason to do it. Like, I would much prefer people who are dedicated to doing these tasks than just adding it onto the load of other 3-letter agencies. It just tells me that it's going to be less prioritized.
Maybe those agencies are going to be more efficient and less
We have no reason to believe
partisan, less
that.
biased.
We have no reason to believe that that's the case, right?
Well,
Donald
what I
Trump
see
has
is
no reason to believe that that's the case.
I don't know, there's a heavy liberal bias in all levels of education. I've seen it.
But dismantling the Department of Education isn't going to do shit for that, right? The schools make their own curriculums. Whatever like liberal bias you perceive just isn't going to, the dismantling the Department of Education isn't going to change any of that unless you abuse your power in doing it, but it'd be illegal.
Well, what I've seen in government, obviously we all know that they make sure to spend all the money in their budget so that their budget doesn't get lowered the next year. And we see a lot of incentive for wasteful spending. Even if they don't need all that money, they're going to make sure to spend it. And what we see is a lot of the times these agencies operating in a they become bloated and wasteful, and they cost.
If that's the case, that same problem. If that's the case, that same problem is going to exist under whatever department we give it to do the same exact funding.
So you expecting voters like myself to place all of our trust in the inspector general, who's also part of the bureaucracy.
I think you should trust the inspector general more than Elon Musk. Yeah.
Real quick, can I ask something about the bureaucracy point?
I'm not so sure because again,
this
is the same bureaucracy which has again had us deficit spending and accruing so much debt over the years that it's what's got us to this point. So you gotta understand as a voter why a third party coming in and auditing the auditors seems appealing.
The biggest problem is that you're against the bureaucracy because you perceive some amount of like special interest, but I can actually show you special interest with Elon Musk and we just kind of ignore it.
I'm talking about the wasteful spending that we all know has been going on.
Donald Trump is spending just as much as anybody else. He's actually probably spending more.
Yeah, but
like
that
the One Big Beautiful
ICE.
Bill spent a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, but it's going to ICE, which I'm okay with.
Okay, so your problem isn't wasteful spending. Your problem is that you just didn't like how this spending was allocated, right?
But when we give it to ICE, it's not wasteful spending. They're going to get more.
I would argue it's incredibly wasteful
spending. They're going to give us more ICE agents.
I would say
they're going to go after.
Do you understand the difference? Like when wasteful spending as a term, what do you think that means?
It means that they're spending more to do a job than is necessary.
No.
And it ends up costing taxpayers.
So this is one of the biggest problems.
This was to fulfill a task.
This was one of the bait and switches that Doge did as well, is that when we talk about wasteful spending in the government, we're saying the government allocated this much money and it didn't go to this. That's a wasteful or fraudulent spending, right? Like wasteful is when you allocate this much money, the job was done for less money, so you don't need the rest of the money, right? Or fraudulent spending is Congress allocated this funding for this thing, but it didn't go to this thing. That's fraudulent, right? Fraudulent does not mean that Congress allocated funding to this thing, but the president didn't like it, so he could just cancel it anyway. That's unconstitutional. You're not allowed to do that, right? That's not what wasteful spending is. So when I'm saying wasteful spending, or when you're saying wasteful spending, we're talking about two different things. When you say wasteful spending, you're just saying this money went to something I don't like. The answer to that isn't putting in a billionaire with special interest, right? The answer to that is voting in different congresspeople to pass a different budget bill.
I was talking about auditing these agencies and making sure that they're not receiving vast amounts of money more than they need to do their jobs.
That amount of money is allocated by Congress. The executive branch can't do shit. Like Elon Musk and Donald Trump can't do shit about the money that's already allocated through Congress.
Well, it's still, so you're saying an audit still shouldn't happen just because some money's already allocated?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we already have a body that audits the federal government.
This was before the big beautiful bill was passed. So why not do the audit right when Trump gets in office and make sure that what we have
we should be doing audits all the time, and we do.
The big beautiful bill is accurate budget amount for what the job needs to be done.
We already do that. We already audit the 3-letter agencies to make sure that there's no wasteful spending. We already do that.
Yeah, one 3-letter agency audits another 3-letter agency, and on it goes.
There's oversight into the Office of the Inspector General.
Those motherfuckers. I'm saying audit that inspector general, motherfucker.
If you actually cared about this, you would read the officer. Like, first of all, you didn't even know what the office of the inspector general is. Okay, so I don't know why you're claiming fraud retroactively. But second of all, the office of the inspector general is already incredibly transparent. They publish reports all the time. You can read the OIG reports on any given thing all of the time. Like, how do you think we know that the fucking Department of Defense keeps failing audits? It's because of the OIG. It's because of these reports. These are transparent. People actually cared about this level of transparency into the federal government. We already have it. You guys just don't want to read. And that's fine because it's a lot of boring reading, but you're trusting the fucking billionaire with a bunch of special interests to do the reading for you, right? He's lying to you. That's the problem.
He was not lying. He said he was going to give ICE a bigger budget, and he delivered.
That's not combating fraud, waste, and abuse.
It's giving the money to agencies that are actually going to put that money to good use, and ICE definitely will.
That's a political question. That's not fraud or waste. That's just not you not liking where the money's going. Take it up with Congress. Elect new Congress people. That doesn't get you any closer to Doge or Donald Trump. Because it's I'm sorry, I just presuppose that we do this. I don't think we should. Congress is responsible for allocating the budget. That's a Congress job. That's not a president job. That's not an executive job. That's not anybody else's job except for Congress. Congress controls the power of the purse. Right? So
yeah, I didn't
if
say
you
that
don't like how
doing.
Congress allocates the funding, then
auditors.
I'm sorry?
I didn't say that Congress Doge was going to allocate money. I said that Doge was doing an audit.
No. I'm not saying that they allocate money. Doge cannot cancel funding because they don't like where it's going. It has to be on the grounds that it's fraudulent or wasteful.
They can provide reports on what's going on with the audit. They can make the audit and then report back to the president, which I think... the
president can't do that either. The president can't stop funding going from things that he doesn't like. They can cut contracts, and that's about it. Right? There's an impoundment power of the president, but you actually have to... Veto power has nothing to do with this. You would veto the budget when it's passed, but once the budget is already passed into law, you can't retroactively revoke a piece of legislation. You can't do that.
Well, he still has a humongous amount of power in the Republican Party. Basically, he is the Republican Party. Okay. And one of the things you complain about.
So why would you need Elon Musk? Why would you need Elon Musk? If Donald Trump just said, hey, stop funding this, he doesn't need Elon Musk to do that. Why are we doing it under the illusion that this is fraud, waste, or abuse? Why not just say, I don't like the spending?
You're trying to make it sound like that's all I'm saying.
That's all that's been found. Right? Like all of the claims of fraud, waste, and abuse, like, are basically non-existent. Like almost everything that Doge claimed was highly political. It was just contracts that they didn't like. And they were claiming the entirety of the contract, even though most of it had already been paid out. Right, like the actual amount of fraud, waste, or abuse that Doge found is incredibly slim because Doge had very little statutory authority to do it. That's why I'm saying we should have relied on the OIG because they already have the power that exists.
I'll have to fact check you on all that.
Okay. Well, give me 1 second. TikTok is being super weird right now. Okay. Gather, if you want to ask your question, you can, but I'm going to kick you after because I try and keep it 1v1.
Okay, peace and love. Okay, two things real quick. I'm pretty sure the Doge cited the Inspector General reports. So if you're wanting reports from the government audits, like I'm pretty sure they cited that as their findings. Two, I feel like you presuppose that bureaucracy is inherently like a bad thing. But earlier in the conversation, when you were talking about Minnesota and the fraud that is being alleged, like you're inherently wanting more bureaucracy to be added to Minnesota to adjust for whatever fraudulent claims you say exist.
I didn't say bureaucracy was necessarily bad. I said that we need audits and that we know that
every time you mention bureaucracy, you mean it in a negative way, in a negative connotation. That's why you say you need like a third party. That's why you say you need Doge.
Well, you've 1000% said that you don't want more bureaucracy, but it's super true. Like when you're talking about the Minnesota fraud, you're relying on bureaucracy to find that, right?
You're not going to give me this isn't the little gotcha you're trying to make it. I said inefficiency and wasteful spending.
No, it's not a gotcha or anything. The point is that like you should just reconsider the way that bureaucracy is like mentioned or evaluated in general.
I understand that even our Department of Justice is bureaucracy. I understand that. I'm still saying that sometimes audits from a third party could be a good thing to make sure that we're up to staying on top of wasteful spending and inefficiency.
You understand that the Office of the Inspector General isn't a part of the three-letter agencies that they audit, right? That is a third party. Like the Inspector General for the EPA is not a part of the EPA. They are a third party that is auditing the agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, Gather,
I
I
would
love
hope
you.
that
I love you so
that
much.
would be the
Okay.
case.
Peace and love. Bye.
Peace and love. More so love, though. Yeah, you could say you would hope that's the case. It is the case, right? So you're saying we just need a third party to come in, right? We do have a third party. It's called the Office of the Inspector General. What I think you mean when you say third party is like an unaccountable third party, somebody that is basically not beholden to the three-letter agencies at all, or that you can't complain about. Like, we don't want a third party with impunity coming in and finding shit, right? We want a third party who actually knows what they're talking about. We want an inspector general, right? So they can't be corruptly fired by the three-letter agencies, but they can have a decent understanding of what goes on there.
When it wasn't Doge itself, an agency, it's a
No.
four-letter agency. It's not
No.
completely. Yeah, it's not like it's this completely private thing. It's
Executive agencies are created by Congress. Doge was not. It's just an intelligence thing.
Okay, well, I mean, I still don't think that the amount of fraud, special interests that you kind of were implicating happened. Really
Don't you think it's kind of weird? Don't you
think?
think it's kind of weird that we like the person that we're relying on to find fraud in the federal government that we gave the power to cut contracts has competitors that have government contracts with that have federal contracts with the government? Don't you think that opens itself up for a lot of potential fraud? Like the government has contracts with Elon Musk competitors. Don't you think that opens itself up for fraud unnecessarily?
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe that even if Elon committed some type of fraudulent or special interest behavior, he should be held accountable. I just haven't seen any proof that that happened.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know if you have something you want to talk about. I feel like we probably hit that end here. Cringy, I don't know why you just let that guy up, if I'm being honest.
He's not gonna see any evidence because Trump has fired all of the solicitor and inspectors general.
That's true. I don't know if they ever got replaced or not.
So you're saying we don't have an inspector?
Fire a bunch of inspector generals.
Trump fired everybody that would hold him accountable. He only has yes men in his cabinet. He has people like Bondi and Kash Patel and Bongino, who's leaving here in a couple weeks, that were running completely on releasing the Epstein files. Trump wanted them released.
Listen, I love you, buddy. I don't know why my moderator let you up here. We try and keep it 1v1, but I do love you and I greatly appreciate you, buddy.
Oh, well, I'll bounce. No worries. Check this guy because he's missing the point.
I'm trying my hardest, buddy. We've been here for 40 minutes. Okay. Okay.
So I'm assuming we currently have an inspector and solicitor general who Trump appointed.
Some of them,
right?
yeah. I actually don't know.
And he basically alluded that just because Trump made his own appointment, and he assumes it's a yes man, that Elon Musk won't be held accountable for if he did commit some type of fraudulent behavior.
Well, how would you even hold Elon accountable?
There's people whose job it is to do just that, right?
Whose job is it to overlook what Elon Musk did?
Wouldn't it be the inspector general?
Trump fired them all. Like,
well, don't presidents make their own appointments when they get inaugurated?
It depends. So I'm trying to, my keyboard's not working right now for some goddamn reason, but I'm trying to look up. So there's different aspects of the federal government that the president has different levels of authority over. So like Donald Trump can't just fire Jerome Powell because it's a separate, more independent branch than like the DOJ, right? So did Trump replace the OIG he fired? Um. Okay, yeah. So he fired a bunch of the OIG and then replaced them with other people. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we see a lot of turnover when a new president is elected and inaugurated. Doesn't sound quite as scandalous as you're trying to maybe make it out to be, I think.
Give me 1 second. Well, this is incredibly. Yeah, okay. So they didn't even hide it, right? In January 2025, at the start of his second term, Trump fired more than a dozen OIG, and the dismissals were carried out through late night emails, and the administration stated it was due to changing priorities. So why would you fire the people that are responsible for auditing the federal government due to changing priorities?
So how many got fired and didn't get replaced?
I think all of them got replaced. I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, that does tend to happen.
No, the
Going
inspector
from one
generals, the
president to another.
inspector general aren't the same as like the attorney general, right? These are different things. It's not like you have to give a reason for firing. I'm 90% sure you need to give a reason for firing the OIG, and the reason that he gave was changing priorities. Like what priority do you think changed that resulted in him firing these people?
I would have to look into it. I don't know. Yeah,
My guess is that it's probably the priority that changed is that he just wanted to give all of the power to Doge, right? It's probably the answer. He was less effective. Only for the very top agencies where they placed historically have they been replaced historically. So I mean, we could look up like process for firing OIG. Firing federal inspector general involves a strict process for the president, and they must provide Congress with a written, detailed, and substantive rationale for the removal for at least 90 days in advance, as established by. Okay, so yeah, these are not like typical Congress, or these are not typical like cabinet positions that are just replaced willy-nilly whenever the next president comes in. I don't think there's an understanding that like you fire these people for that kind of shit, right? Like you need to give cause for them to be fired, which I assume is like legal, right? Like you need to be given like legal challenges.
Perhaps.
The process aims to protect IG's independence and prevent politically motivated firings. So if it's true that the reason that they gave was changing priorities, doesn't that sound exactly like a politically motivated firing?
I'd have to look at the report myself. But you said essentially the reason they gave was changing priorities.
Yeah.
I'd have to. Is that all they said? Because if they gave more explanation, I would like to see it.
Let's
that's something
see.
that I would like to research myself.
I'm seeing nothing beyond changing priorities.
But wouldn't that be illegal?
Yep. Yeah, it sure would.
Yeah, Trump's a rascal.
True. On September 24th, a federal judge ruled that the administration unlawfully fired 17 inspectors general.
I'm glad you brought this up because this is concerning, even though I voted for Trump, and I don't regret voting for Trump, it is still concerning.
According to reports, the inspector generals were notified of their termination via email, citing changing priorities as the reason for their dismissal. see here. I don't know if the emails are public, but it seems like this isn't even contested, that the email said that it's just due to changing priority. I can read more about it and then talk about it later, I guess, but
I can admit it's concerning, actually, and I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad you. I know about that now.
Mhm.
But this does tend to happen, or at least it did his first term, where a lot of people on the left try to make it seem like the sky is falling and everything's terrible under Trump. Well, that's simply not the reality.
well, keep in mind, all right, this is the first thing we've talked about. I think there was much worse than firing the inspector generals, but yeah, the I can meet you halfway, where I think a lot of people are like super apocalyptic about the Trump term, and it could be worse, right? We could have the people that are behind Trump doing these things, right? I partially agree with that. I think the biggest problem is that there's also this existence on the right, and it's because of like how America is typically seen, where there's two parties and each of them are equally valid, and so the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think that's overly charitable. I think that a lot of the times we kind of sane wash the Republicans a lot, where we see the left do something bad and the right do something bad, and we just have to assume that the left is equally as bad as the thing that the right did, because that's just kind of how we're programmed. I think it's actually fairly partisan to say that the right is as bad as the left, because I feel like we're being overly charitable, right? Like I've seen nothing on the left that is as comparable to like 90% of the things that the Donald Trump administration has done, even in this first year. But it feels like we still give them a lot of credence just because he's a Republican, right? Like we give him a lot of the benefit of the doubt just because he's the one that's leading the Republican Party. And I don't understand why.
Well, I think Democrats really only have themselves to blame that they lost the trust of so many American voters like myself. When I just don't think that what Joe Biden allowed with our asylum system is what Americans wanted for our immigration policy. I don't think it's radical for Americans to want reasonable limits and controls on immigration, and not to have asylum claims be the number one way that people are getting into the country. People coming from all around the world showing up at our border in caravans, and and claiming asylum when and we find ultimately that they're just here for economic reasons, and that's why so many asylum claims this year, 80% are being denied, because we find so many of these asylum claims are basically just people coming here for economic reasons. And Americans don't think that that's good immigration policy to have the number one way that people are getting into the country is through our asylum system. They felt like our asylum system was being exploited.
Mm-hmm.
And Kamala didn't do a very good job of giving voters like myself confidence that she was going to manage that better than Biden did. But I believe Trump did. That's why I
think
voted for him.
I thank God, okay, because I usually have these conversations that it's just me bashing my head against the wall because I can't comprehend where somebody's coming from. And I can understand where you're coming from. I think the biggest problem that we're having right now is just that we have a bad net of information. I don't feel like I feel like right now what I'm being given is the most charitable explanation of the Republican position and the most uncharitable explanation of the Democrat position. And that's something that's been super exacerbated right now because Republicans don't talk to Democrats, Democrats don't talk to Republicans. So we're both just living in our own worlds and then throwing rocks at each other, even though we don't know anything about each other, right? So what I would say is that
The
both
catch
sides,
and
I
release
think,
numbers don't lie, though. When you look at
they don't
I know
lie,
that
but okay, listen.
There's a reason why
hold
the
on,
Border
hold on,
Patrol.
hold on. Okay, let's take a chobo. Okay, so I think the problem is that both sides agree that there was a problem with what was happening at the border at the tail end of 2020 into Joe Biden's term. Both sides agreed on that. Both sides wanted to have fixes. It's just that one side promised unilateral action that was probably illegal, and the other side promised the action that goes through the legal processes, right? Like what Joe Biden wanted to do, what Kamala Harris wanted to do was pass that bill that was going through Congress that would have given the president like official statutory authority to shut the border down, to put a moratorium on crossings after a certain level of encounters, right?
Yeah,
What
after
Donald Trump wanted to do was
not
just
just
shut the
encounters.
border down, period.
Not just encounters, catch and release would have codified and allowed 3,000 catch and release a day until they did that shutdown you're talking about.
What do you think what does catch and release mean to you?
After an asylum interview, they were given a court date and then released into the country. That's not good immigration policy. We didn't need
Donald
a
Trump,
bill to
Donald
codify
Trump doesn't.
that.
That's the immigration legislation. Donald Trump isn't going to be able to do anything about that, right? Like this is just standard immigration policy, right? Like
he can issue directives to Border Patrol and to other agencies that handle immigration to essentially limit the parameters that somebody would even be qualified to be admissible or admissible and then be released into the country. Now,
sure, what you're saying is limiting asylum, but that's not a popular thing. Limiting asylum rights is not a popular policy.
It's necessary because
you could say that that's not popular. That's not popular. It's not popular to limit the amount of people who can seek asylum and come to the United States to seek refuge. Right? That's something that that's something that America prides itself on. It's not a popular idea to shut that down.
No, it shouldn't, because they're not real asylum seekers. They're not fleeing war, famine, or genocide.
Fake asylum seekers get rejected. Like the reason that you're telling me that so many asylum claims get rejected is because the immigration courts reject this asylum claims and they get rid of them.
No, Border Patrol determines who's inadmissible, mostly based off of country of origin and based off their asylum interview. If they say something,
yeah, the credible fear interview. If they don't pass credible fear, they get turned around. That was happening under Joe Biden, too.
But essentially, if they do basically just say they're not safe back in their home country, they're given a court date and then released into the country.
No, that's not true. They'll claim asylum and then they're given a credible fear hearing. And then after they pass that, they're released. Right? But you still have to pass the credible fear interview. And if you don't, then you get turned around. And that was happening under Joe Biden. That's happening now. Right? But if you pass your credible fear interview, there's nothing you could do.
And our system was so overloaded to the point where we weren't doing the proper screening and we weren't actually able to conduct the thorough hearings that we needed to do. And basically what happened was,
so what do you think Donald Trump is going to do to cut down on wait times?
He's issued the directives necessary to actually not even allow as many people to be as admissible and de-incentivize people to just show up and claim asylum in the first place.
How?
He can't issue directives, and he has, to these agencies.
Yeah, I'm asking you, what are those directives? Like, what is he telling them to do?
To limit the parameters that we can basically consider who's admissible and whose asylum claims are credible.
Why are we limiting the grounds for which somebody can be admitted through asylum?
Because of the massive amount of exploitation
No, the exploitation that you're citing, doesn't matter if they pass it or not. What you're saying is that they're caught, released, and they don't show up to their court date. The amount that you would need to prove at an asylum hearing presupposes that you're going to the asylum hearing, right? So like what Donald Trump is doing isn't going to cut down on this fraud at all, unless you're talking about the fee to seek asylum, which he did put in place through the Big Beautiful Bill, which is incredibly inhumane because most of the people who genuinely need to seek asylum aren't going to be able to put that bill up.
Yeah, we should shut it all down. Close the book.
Do you think we should have no asylum claims?
We are a country, not a refugee camp.
That's not what I asked. Do you think we should have zero refugee protections, zero asylum protections?
They should go somewhere else. Yes, I do think we should shut it down. Close the book.
Do you think that's popular?
They should go somewhere else.
Do you think that's popular?
What's best for the country isn't always popular.
Wait, so okay, you're talking about Donald Trump getting elected because of how bad the border policy is, and that the left has nobody to blame because you weren't given any serious alternatives by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. One, that's not true. And two, your solution is just as unpopular. Nobody in the United States wants to shut down refugee. Not even Donald Trump wants to do that. He brought in all those white South Africaners.
Exceptions can be made.
For who? Why? Wait, we're not a refugee camp.
Well, let me amend what I said. Let me finish. I do think that there are exceptions for actual asylum seekers because those white South Africans were actually facing...
How do you figure out who's a real asylum seeker if you don't let them seek asylum?
Genocide. We actually keep track of where there's actual...
How do you know somebody's an asylum seeker if you don't let them seek asylum?
Well, you let them seek asylum, you just don't release them into the country, and unless they're actual asylum seekers.
Okay, so why did Donald Trump put a $500 barrier on who can seek asylum? Do you think that real asylum seekers are going to be able to put up $500?
Well, we do have some organizations that will help with that. International organizations that step in and help people who are really at most danger of persecution
I
and
thought you were concerned about
genocide.
sending money outside of the country. Isn't that just going to be sending money outside of the country? NGOs taking American dollars and sending them outside?
Independent NGOs, and if they're doing their job well, they'll actually find people who are really victims of persecution and genocide, like the white South Africans, and help them out.
Yeah. Okay. So to be clear, I feel like I'm probably going to revoke the Honest Engager badge that I gave you. Okay. Because I feel like you're hiding your power level super hard. Right. I feel like you're just kind of going around to whatever immigration policy is most convenient for you to start supporting Trump. Right. Like nobody supports just shutting the border down carte blanche. Nobody wants a moratorium on immigration. That's just not something anybody wants.
90% of immigration, yeah, should be paused. Basically, we should only be taking immigrants from first world countries that know how to govern themselves. Doctors, engineers who are qualified and are going to be an immediate net positive because we already have
hold
too
on.
many.
Do you support H-1B visas?
In very small amounts. I think that.
Okay, so stop giving me the
not a
bullshit
good
about only
thing.
bringing. So, okay, so stop giving me the bullshit about only wanting qualified people. Okay, that's not true. Why?
I don't like American workers, even in tech, being undercut by foreigners. And that's what happens. These companies want to bring in foreigners for cheaper labor.
Don't you
and
think the
Americans
United
get
States
undercut.
benefits from globalism?
I
Like
think that
economically, do you think the United States benefits from globalism?
I think globalism is a threat to the best interest of Americans in our country, in a lot of ways.
Why do you think that?
Again, it sends too many jobs overseas and undercuts workers who are already here too much.
Don't you think it also uplifts the American economy to make the workers' lives better in the United States? Like, do you think we'd be in a better position if we weren't in a global economy?
We're going to bet on American economic power, and they're going to come to us, and we're going to get the better end of the deal.
No. That's globalism. Betting on American economic power, that's globalism, right? But American economic power only exists insofar as we bring the best workers and we bring the best investors from all around the country, right? Like us having an open market to the rest of the United States is what makes America's economy so good. So why are you talking about cutting ourselves off from the rest of the world? It's stupid. And nobody wants it. Nobody wants a 90% moratorium on immigration. So I don't know why you were giving me, oh, well, the Democrats only have themselves to blame because they have unpopular immigration policy, when the immigration policy that you want is less popular than the Democrats. The Democrats literally wanted to put in a moratorium on immigration just after a certain level of encounters and uphold refugee and asylum rights.
Well,
You're against that.
I think that it's good for us to have reasonable limits and controls on companies' options to just outsource labor and to just hire foreigners for cheaper. I think that they should be forced to recruit American, because it's in the best interest of Americans not to get.
No, it's not in the best interest of Americans, because that's not good for the American markets.
But of course, people like you want a virtue signal keep telling us that globalism is good in every way, shape, and form.
By the way, you just conceded that globalism is good by saying that America is going to bet on its own economic power. On what stage? On what stage would America need to bet on its own economic power to bring in trade partners? On the global stage, right? You're a globalist. So I don't know why you're trying to virtue signal as anti-globalist while agreeing with the globalist system.
No, I meant as far as us having protectionist policies in place. And
it's worse for the economy. So I would rather the workers live in a world where they can succeed in a better economy rather than unnecessarily limiting our economic potential.
Well, I don't think it will. I think that you bet on American economic power by putting in place those protectionist policies.
If you were to bet on, I want you to bet on American economic power. I think that if Americans are the naturally most skilled workers, they will get the job. I want to bet on American power. You think American economic power isn't strong enough, so we need to add protectionist barriers to prevent people from getting their jobs taken. I want to bet on American economic power. You don't. You want to protect against it.
The problem is they're not hiring the best workers who are Americans. They're hiring cheaper workers who are foreigners who aren't the best workers.
Where?
That's the problem.
Where?
You see it all.
Like in what
all over
sectors?
Tech, foreigners with fake credentials who will work cheaper for Microsoft, for all these tech companies and software companies. You see it, and you see it.
Can you show
with
me
the amount of
anything
people.
to indicate that?
It's a quick Google search away to find out how many of these companies, like Microsoft, depend year after year on H-1Bs.
Hold on. That's different. I asked you to substantiate that foreigners are lying about their credentials to come over and work for cheaper wages. I didn't ask you if Microsoft is relying on H-1Bs.
Yeah, they do that a lot.
Is that your source? They do it a lot?
Yep. Yeah,
Good
there's
one, buddy.
articles where they've actually interviewed anonymous sources who have talked about this at length. Former supervisors who have actually had people put under them who they found out that their credentials were fake and that they're.
What scale are you talking about? What scale do you think you're talking about here?
It's a collection of anonymous sources who talked
Oh
about
my god.
this.
Okay. So
Who
this
worked
is a
with these
translation
people.
towards this is a problem that I'm manufacturing, right? To prove my point, right? If this was true, you would be able to bear it out. Like Google wouldn't be relying as much on H-1B visas if this was true, because all these people are coming over and lying about their credentials, right? If this was true, if this was a big problem, Google and Microsoft wouldn't be relying on the H-1B visas, because that's a clear problem that speaks against their economic interests.
Their economic interests are
Yes.
to pay less.
Their
And
economic
they
interests
do
are to
that.
have efficient workers. If somebody's expecting too much pay for the work, they're going to go to somebody who's equally qualified that will do it for less work or do it for less money, right? You're saying that these people are underqualified. Where's your evidence? Or that they're lying about their qualifications. Where's your evidence? Unless you're saying that we should put, like, companies are mandated to pay out this much, in which case, like, sounds a little socialist to me, right? Like, I don't know if wage controls like that are super great.
Well, on all these reports that measure how many H-1B visas these companies use, we see the median wages or salaries, and it just keeps undercutting American workers, and it just keeps getting lower because they keep hiring foreigners. And
I
I will
don't know
vote
what
for the
point
best
I
interest
don't
of
know what
American
point you think you're
workers
making.
and
Like,
them not getting
do you think
undercut.
it's good to be able to get efficient workers? Like a company's ability to get efficient workers, do you think that that's like good? We should be propping up their ability to get efficient workers so they're not overpaying for labor?
Not if they're foreigners, they should hire American.
Why?
Because that's the country of the company, and they should
That's
hire
it? Just the
American because these
border?
are American
The
companies.
borders are why? Like, I want a system where I can have an efficient economy that can uplift everybody. Now, why do you want an economy that only uplifts like
Americans,
white
yeah,
Americans?
I do think that it is in the best interest of Americans for American companies to put the best
I'm
interest
saying
of
your economy is going to
their own
perform. You're
market.
doing this at the expense of economic efficiency. Why? What's the argument for
Not
doing this at the
necessarily. Not
expense?
necessarily.
Yes,
Not
necessarily, because you're complaining that people are doing equivalent labor for less money. So if you want to force them to hire native, you're going to make them shell out more money for equal labor. That's necessarily economically detrimental. You're
Not
having companies
necessarily.
overpay for their labor.
Not necessarily overpay, but definitely pay a good wage for Americans for their services, not
And you
undercut them
accused
by
me of
hiring
virtue
foreigners.
signaling? Really?
No, this is what I'm all about. I vote for. I'm not
Virtue signaling? I believe it.
I put the best interest of Americans first
No, you
with
don't.
my vote.
No, you don't.
I don't
Stop
believe
pretending that. Americans
an
don't want this.
American-
Americans don't agree with you. You don't put the interest of Americans. Stop pretending. Let's stop pretending, right? You are doing this at the expense of economic indicators, right? Like, if you were to ask Americans, hey, would you prefer companies to hire exclusively American if you knew that it was going to hurt the economy? Do you think they'd say yes?
Now the burden of proof is on you to say that it would hurt the economy because
Okay, I'll demonstrate it to you incredibly simply. Can you name me one country that you want to emulate that doesn't engage in a globalist system like this?
it's not that simple.
Oh, okay. Like, if this wasn't more efficient, why the fuck would we be doing it? If an American company could not pay to bring somebody in through an H-1B and just hire domestic, why don't they? Don't you think it's easier for a company to hire American than import somebody with an H-1B visa?
They should hire an American instead of just paying less and less for
okay,
foreign
just don't
labor.
answer that question. Listen, if I were in your position, I wouldn't answer that question either, buddy.
If it's just paying less and
LOL.